We all get overwhelmed at times. My childhood was like that. I was taught by nuns with horrifying stories of hell and damnation. I kept trying to understand that, but I was punished for even asking. You're bad, they said. You should be good. Back then, children got no respect. Becoming a Buddhist monk helped. It gave me time to explore myself and gain some confidence. But when it was time to return to this world of work and money and responsibility, I was overwhelmed all over again. I felt I couldn't cope. I should give up. That's overwhelmed for you, isn't it? I can't face it. But I did. I kept exploring and I saw that overwhelm doesn't just happen to you. It's something you do. So it's something you can stop doing. It's just a matter of understanding your own mental patterns, and this is the great know thyself of Greek philosophy. When you're aligned with your true values, you can change. But if you don't act on them, they don't really matter. So what are those values? Balance, clarity, compassion, growth, respect, honesty, insight, and more than anything else, self-reliance, the willingness to depend on your own intelligence and your own humanity, because as a human you have a skill that no other creature on this planet has. You can change the way you think. You can change the way you react, and that means everything. It means you can change your experience, especially the experience of being overwhelmed. And that's what we're going to learn in this course, Being Overwhelmed and How to Overcome It. This is a course about mindfulness, and not just mindfulness in order to deal with stress or overwhelm, but mindfulness as a lifestyle, because overwhelm is also a lifestyle in a sense. It is our inability or our choice to not be able to respond to what's going on in our lives. We get so many different emotions that we have to deal with, so much negativity, so much discomfort, that we decide we don't want to do it. And that's something that humans are very good at. We have developed a great power of denial, so that even when we know something, we can lie to ourselves about it and appear to believe it. We're a very funny race, very interesting. Anyway, our job here, and this is a good example right from get-go, is not to judge that, to not say, oh, that's stupid, that's ridiculous. Our job is to look at it and say, okay, how does denial work? So this is our whole approach. We're not here to shame. We're not here to make up any sort of perfect scenario that you should believe in and then try and pursue. We're trying to look at the way your life is right now, how it's working out, and what you can do about it. So in this first session out of 5, we're going to be identifying that feeling. And in fact, what we're trying to do is to take back your power, or to put it another way, unload your baggage. So baggage refers to those emotional traumas that we went through as children, big ones and small ones, and from which we learned. We learned whenever we get hurt, we defend ourselves in some way. At the very, very least, we close our eyes and shove our fists into our eyes and just wait for everything to go away. That is a defensive reaction. Or we may shout, or we may cry, whatever. At different stages in our lives, we try different things, and we tend to adopt those behaviors, even though they're not really very worked out, because when we learn them, we're still very young and we don't have any experience. We don't really know what we're doing. But once we've learned them, they become convenient ways to react to the world, and we tend to rely on them. Okay? So we carry it around with us. That's baggage. And when it doesn't work out, we carry that those consequences with us all the time. We'll relive them. And apart from the fact that many of those items of baggage are not very well put together, there's also a ton of baggage which we simply don't need, which we could just shed, but which we carry around everywhere. Opinions, beliefs, preferences, expectations. So we're going to be trying to clear the decks, clear your mind. And our goal here is, the long-term goal of course, is peace of mind. But in the short term, it's not that simple. In the short term, you have to face the negativity and you have to face the unpleasantness and the discomfort. And so that's what we're going to be doing. But it's worth it. It's very worth it. Let me tell you a little about myself and where I'm coming from. So I was trained as a Buddhist monk. That's me in the top left there of the picture. And as a Buddhist monk, I learned all about the mind, and I learned about my mind, and I learned some tools as well. I learned all about mindfulness, which is the mindfulness teachings which are used in science and medicine these days are taken virtually verbatim from the Buddhist scriptures. They've been well organized, and they've created a lot of supporting material around it, but it's basically identical. However, I'm not concerned simply with overcoming stress. To me, mindfulness is a lifestyle. Yes, it helps you overcome stress, put stress on the back burner. It turns reactivity, automated reactivity, into thoughtful response. It enables you to connect better with other people, to understand your place in society, in the world, and to make the world a little bit better than it was when you first arrived. I teach cancer patients. They're a big segment of my students, and what I've learned from them is that, well, it's something that I learned from my Tibetan teachers many years ago, which is that when you're faced with your own mortality, your attention is very focused and remarkable things are happening. So when I first started teaching cancer patients, my first thought was, well, what can I do? How can I, especially people who have a terminal diagnosis, they've only got so long to live. So what can I do? How can I help? Well, I can help. And I discovered that the help is more powerful than I expected, because their own confrontation with their mortality makes them particularly receptive to this message and the practice. And it makes it much easier for them to let go of their expectations and preferences and hopes and get to the point. This is how long I've got to live. I want to enjoy, I want to live this life to the full. I want to love my family. I want to spend time with them. I want this time to count. And the response is always amazing. These are not simply people with cancer. These are people with cancer who are willing to self-care, to look after themselves, to try and make things better. It takes courage. It takes courage anyway, because what we're doing is sort of going against the flow of society, which just wants us to consume and enjoy and consume and enjoy and consume and enjoy until we die, which is not something to look forward to. I mean the consuming. You know what I mean. Right, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. So when you feel overwhelmed, there are three things to keep in mind: mindfulness, reactivity, and letting go. These three form a pattern. Well, not exactly a pattern, but we're working them together, because mindfulness enables you to identify what's going on. And most importantly, we want to identify a reactivity. And once we've identified it, we want to be able to let it go. A lot of people just want to let it go, but if you don't identify it first, if you don't see what you're hanging on to, it's sort of hard to let go. You know, this is very specific, very practical stuff. This is about your emotions, the sort of emotions that come up when you're dealing with family, with trauma, with horrible memories, with horrible diagnoses, with work issues, with your boss, with dealing with children, dealing with life. So first of all, understanding these three, mindfulness, reactivity and letting go, enables you to see how being overwhelmed is a habit that you can change. It's a habit. You are choosing to be overwhelmed. I know it doesn't feel like it, but we're going to show you how that is so. And if you're choosing to be overwhelmed, then that implies the good news, which is that you can choose something else. You can choose a different response, something thoughtful. And that's what mindfulness gives you, the opportunity to step back and think again. So, to define mindfulness, I've made a new definition here, not because I think all the other ones are wrong, but because I think you can't have too many. Mindfulness is a very basic mental function. It's the prominent one at the moment you're born. This is how you become aware of your environment and you recognize what's good, what's bad, what you want, what you don't like. And you don't have experience, you don't have knowledge, you don't have language, you have mindfulness. And the pace of mindfulness slows down as we get older and mature, and we start to think that we know what's going on and we know ourselves. And then instead of the mindfulness, we tend to rely on the reactivity, which we're talking about, and of which we will speak volumes in these 5 courses. So this is my definition: conscious, present attention to immediate experience. Okay, that's the first part. So immediate experience means your sensory experience. Anything that you can touch, smell, taste, hear or see. These are your 5 bodily senses. And when you're paying attention to them, your attention is in the present moment. Sensation doesn't happen any other time. You can remember a sensation, but your primary mental object there is the memory. It's not the sensation. It's not actually happening. So we always start the mindfulness training in the body. The body is very, very important, not just because it's easier to identify, but because it's the source and it reflects our emotional state as well. And it gives us clues as to how we're feeling and gives us an opportunity to step in and change things a bit. So that's what I mean by immediate experience. Conscious, present attention to immediate experience without getting caught up in shoulds and shouldn'ts. Okay, that mind, is this right? Is it wrong? Which word should it be? Shouldn't be? No judgment, no expectation, no bias. That's the hard part. Okay. The first instruction that most people get when they study meditation of any sort is close your mind and focus on something, your breath, usually the breath. And the first thing you notice is that your mind is very scattered. It's all over the place. You're thinking of what you're going to do for lunch tomorrow, something that happened yesterday, remember something that happened 30 years ago, feel an itch in your knee and you start scratching it and you want to move and then you feel rest. This is the sort of thing that happens when you try to sit down and do nothing. It's not easy, not at first. And a lot of people say, I can't do it. I just can't do it. But the reality is they are doing it, because this is the first insight. The first insight is to see the actual state of your mind. You may not like it, but that's how it is. And you may resist it, but you can see the resistance. And as it becomes more conscious, see through it. And simply see the fact that my mind is erratic. It's all over the place right now. Or maybe your mind is totally fixated on one thing, one anger or a piece of jealousy or some memory that you just can't let go of. Sometimes we just get focused, but it's all a reactive mind. It's all a playing out of the same old stuff. Same old baggage. So when you feel overwhelmed, when you have that sense of all these emotions, I can't deal with it, it's just too much, then what happens is funny, because we make that decision, it's too much. And it sounds like, well, we are in fact blaming the world outside for our emotional state, but that's not the way it is. The world is just the world. It's stressful, it's difficult, it's unpredictable, and it's always changing. That's the way it is. Sometimes we can handle it, and sometimes we can't. That's our choice. But the trouble is that very often that choice, especially the choice to be overwhelmed, is made at a subconscious level. We don't even know we're making it, and we just slip into it. It's part of our baggage. Oh, I've always done this. It's always like this. Damn, why does life always treat me like this? That's baggage, okay? I'm reliving it. I'm telling my story the same old way. I'm refusing to acknowledge that I'm a part of this. And so, of course, I'm closing the door on any possibility of doing anything about it. So, to open that door, we bring this stuff up from the unconscious into the conscious mind, and we take a square look at it. So we do choose to be overwhelmed, and we can choose to let go of overwhelmed. But in order to let go of it, we have to see it as it's happening. Not just remember, oh, yesterday I was overwhelmed and I did this and that. And when you do that, what you're doing is you're working out a theory. So instead of being theoretical about this, we want to see it as it's happening. I'm overwhelmed now. How does this feel? How does my body feel? What is my mind? What's my mood? And what thoughts are coming out of this? We're examining our experience to see how we are interacting with the world and to see what choices we have. Okay, we can't just stop it. We can't just turn the switch off. It's not that sort of choice. But it's a choice in how we respond. Okay? You can't change what happens. You can change how you respond. And there's two types of response. There's the automated reactivity, which we've learned, which is our baggage. Or there's a thoughtful response in which we take a breath, and that breath is going to become a reminder for you of your conscious mind. And you're going to use that breath to focus, to let go of all those expectations and judgments and biases that are getting in your way, to let go of the past and the future, focus on the present moment and say, well, what's going on? What is this? Without any preference. I mean, there's always preference. I'd like to be happy rather than unhappy. But if I feel unhappy, I'm not going to try and change that right now. I'm just going to look at it and try and understand it. So, experience always happens now. That's why it's all about being in the present moment. Automaticity is another word for reactivity, but of course the word itself implies a little more. So the mind seeks patterns. It's a pattern identification machine and a pattern creating machine. We can come up with ideas, we can invent things. We're very good at this. And the human brain is extremely powerful. And it's a lot of fun. It can be very beguiling. Okay? So, how do we learn? How do I learn to button my shirt? Okay? When I was a little boy, I looked at it very carefully. I studied the buttons, I studied the hole. Mostly it was about my fingertips. And now I can do it without thinking. In fact, I can do it while I'm thinking about something else. I can do it while I'm having a conversation. So that is automaticity. Okay? I learned the hard way, but it became wired. The brain has created a subroutine, if you want, okay, for using my fingers, for doing buttons, for writing. I can write a whole page of text without having to think about how to form the shape of the letters. I'm focused on the content, the meaning that I'm trying to convey. So that's automaticity. So automaticity is a very important learning tool. Without it, we would not be able to create the things that we create and extend our knowledge to the extent that we do. But there's a downside to it as well, because automaticity doesn't just affect your motor skills and your practical skills, it also affects your interpersonal skills. So those patterns that you learned as a child, those defensive reactions that you picked up, have become automatic, and they just kick in by themselves. They operate subconsciously. Most of what your brain does, it does subconsciously. You might think that's funny, but I'm not talking about your thoughts. I'm talking about the brain or the nervous system or the combination of both, brain and whatever, which regulates your breathing, regulates your heartbeat, regulates your metabolism, the release of hormones, your temperature control, your cardiovascular system, a million things. If this were not automated, if all this were conscious, you wouldn't have time to think of anything. You'd be constantly busy just maintaining your body. So automaticity is a good thing in many ways. But there's a downside to it, which we need to be very aware of. And it all comes from our craving for pattern making and identifying and naming things and believing that we know what they are when we put a name on them, as if we've solved the problem. It's more complicated than that. This is another common term that's often used interchangeably with mindfulness, bare attention. And it's not that you need to worry about this particular phrase, but it does give another angle on it. It's bare in the sense that you're not dwelling on the past, not dwelling on the future. There's no prejudice. There's no expectation in there. You're just staring, looking at what is, rather like a scientist who goes into the jungle to observe the orangutans. They sit at a distance and watch. Or maybe they get a bit closer, but basically watching, not judging. Just trying to understand this behavior. Oh, this one is doing that, and this one responds like that. And this is the way that they're behaving. And you write it down, you take notes, and you just tuck it all away. You put all that information somewhere safe. And you get into the habit of observing in this way and being non-judgmental. So that's what bare attention is. It's attention to what's going on without involving your forebrain so much, without all that analysis. Just the facts, just the evidence. So what this means is, well, it amounts to this radical honesty. The ability to see plainly and to describe to yourself in a very plain way what's going on. It's not easy. It takes practice, because that denial skill that I was talking about is very deeply ingrained in us, and we use it all the time. We learn as a child, you know. Stephen, did you? Oh, it wasn't me. I didn't do it. You know what I mean? It's all children do that. When they feel in danger, they deny. And as adults, maybe we do it in a more sophisticated way, but without practice, without a deliberate plan to turn that around, we all continue to do it because it's worked in the past and we haven't questioned it yet. We don't have to keep doing that. It's possible to let go of that denial. The reason I call it radical honesty is because it's just so unusual. You know? How are you? Oh, I'm great, thank you. You see, that's not really true. I mean, I'm not great. I'm okay. But I mean, even that, it's not really the truth. The truth is, well, I'm feeling a little bit tired today and a little bit overwhelmed maybe because I've got all this work to do. I'm recording this video for my classes. And so we don't do that. We just do the short version, and we do it in a way which avoids the messy questions or avoids putting the other person in a difficult situation. We had a friend a few years ago who suffered from cancer, and she actually died of it. And when she was first diagnosed, she didn't tell us. She didn't tell anyone. And it was clear when it finally came out, she was so embarrassed. She felt guilty for making us feel bad. She felt guilty for making us feel at a loss for words. We didn't know what to say. Oh my God, how awful. What do you say when someone says that they're going to die? It's very hard. So she was not being honest. She was being dishonest for the kindest of reasons, in a sense. But she was also denying herself the comfort of her friends. You know, we can listen. We can be there for her. And that's a big deal. You know, just to be able to listen and be there for somebody, that's a wonderful gift, especially when they're suffering. So, in that sense, I call this sort of honesty radical, because we're talking about the facts of life, the reality, the tough stuff. And we're not making it into candy canes or, sugaring it up. Okay, let's take a moment and start with a nice breath. And as you breathe in, your attention comes into the body. So now you're aware of yourself from the inside. You can feel your chest moving. Pumping the air in and out. And this moment is an experience. And it feels like something. So how are you feeling? Be aware. And be comfortable telling yourself the truth. And take the time to feel, even if you're not really able to put words to it. You're feeling, you're experiencing that feeling, and you know that feeling. So just leave your attention there. And stay with the breath. And while you breathe and you feel this experience, you're also generating thoughts. And the thoughts try to pull you away, but you let go. And you do that simply by noticing thoughts. Back to the breath. Back to the breath. And you let go, just let them go. Some of them will seem very important, and you can take care of them later. But right now, you let go your thoughts, you return to the breath, And you feel from the inside as your body breathes, and as you feel this experience, this moment. And then you notice new thoughts, and you call them thoughts, and you let them go. And now, taking 3 more breaths, open your eyes. So we've seen that reactivity is an essential tool for learning and advancing in life, and that it's also a way to act without thinking things through. So you can see the danger, okay? And this is what generally gets us into trouble. We act without fully thinking things through, which most of the time works out okay. Take driving, for example. You know, when you drive from work to home, home to, I know no one does that anymore, but there's a time, you know, a very, very familiar route that you often do. You get in the car and you're talking to a friend, or you're thinking about something, and, you know, all you've got on your mind is that thought, and you're driving, you're stopping, you're turning, you're keeping your eye on the road around you, you're completely aware, and yet, you know, you're not quite. It's all happening automatically. If someone steps out in front of the car, you're probably going to slam the brakes on and everything should be all right. So the extent to which we rely on reactivity is amazing, because we can step in at any time. And in that case, when we're driving, we're acutely aware of the danger, and so we're ready to step in. But when you're talking to your family, and it's a big family gathering, and there's a big fight going on, and you're trying to maintain your place in the hierarchy and trying to defend your reputation, then it's a lot harder. Because, first of all, it's more complicated. Secondly, it's emotional. And thirdly, it goes way, way, way back to your childhood patterns. And those patterns have been so thoroughly practiced again and again and again, they're second nature. It doesn't even feel like a reaction, it just feels like an instinct now. So that's the sort of reactivity you really want to watch out for. When you get your handle on that, when you start to change that reactivity into thoughtful response, your life changes. Literally. It's a big deal. So this is self-observation. That's really the purpose of mindfulness, is to see yourself in action, okay? And the question is, how am I reacting? Yes, how am I breathing? Yeah, how does my body feel? How does my mind, what sort of thoughts are coming up? But the reality that when I say it changes your life, what makes it transformative is when we bring this mindful attitude into ordinary everyday situations. Okay? When we see ourselves in life reacting, and we see the consequences of our reactivity, and we start to keep track of it. You see, as you realize what the payoff is for certain behaviors, you see ways to modify it. Well, I can do that a little better next time. Okay? For example, having an argument with your wife or your husband. You can disagree strongly and emotionally, but you don't have to be rude. So this is, in all relationships, this is a very important thing that you can learn about in business too. You want to be able to disagree, you want to be able to have your opinion, but you also want to be perfectly respectful. And not just to the other person, but to yourself as well. So even if the other person does end up shouting and screaming, you still want to keep your cool. And that's hard, because then you start getting more defensive, and there's more likelihood that you will react. Well, we all know that. So the way to change that is, first of all, to say, well, how am I reacting? You know, to create this distance, this objectivity, so that you see not just, wow, how could he say something like that? That's wrong. But, oh, I see myself becoming defensive, and I'm about to blurt out something, and well, I'm not going to. I'm going to do something different this time. You see the difference? You're caught up in the reaction, or you observe your tendency to react. That's your choice. If you can choose to observe, or I should say when you choose to observe, you learn. And when you don't, because events are just too overpowering, they're too fast, then, you sort of learn what you can from it and hope you'll do better next time. And generally you do. If you practice, you tend to get better at it. You see your breaking point, at an earlier moment, before all that momentum has started to really roll down the hill. You catch it early. You see, oh, I'm being defensive. I'm not going to be defensive. And then you have choices. And the choice comes from this question: how am I reacting? The purpose of mindfulness. There are so many memes these days on social media about mindfulness and how peaceful it is, and how the present moment is the best moment there is, and it's lovely and peaceful. And you might think of meditation as being something blissful and calming and peaceful, and it can be, but mindfulness is a little more radical than that. It's a little more demanding. Walking down a path beside a river with the trees waving in the wind and the water gurgling, and the sun is just on the horizon, and the sky is beautiful, and you're in the present moment. You're there, It's stunning, it's beautiful, and you feel completely at one with nature. Yes, that's mindfulness, but it's not the only sort. It's good to be happy, it's good to be up, but that's not particularly productive. Not the same way as when you notice your reactivity, which is much less pleasant, embarrassing maybe, or even humiliating sometimes. There are sometimes I feel myself reacting, or when I remember the way that I've reacted in a certain situation, I might feel absolutely mortified. I can't face it. I can't believe, what an awful person I am. So again, we want to create some objectivity here. When that happens, you say, here's me judging myself to be an awful person. You're going to see that itself is a mental pattern that you can let go of. Okay, and in this way we gradually become more objective, more discerning, more detached from our judgments and our expectations. So the purpose of mindfulness is not just to feel good and to be in the present moment because it's lovely, but it's to let go of reactivity. And in order to let go of it, we first have to see it. This is how we see it. Or I should say, this is a very systematic way of seeing it and learning about ourselves through labeling or naming. Same thing. So the purpose of this is to realize that your feelings are not who you are. Okay? So when I feel that shame, that embarrassment, and I am ashamed, I am inadequate, I am wrong, something wrong with me, it's intrinsic to me. That feeling, which is so hurtful and so harmful and so wrong, that's not who I am, that's just a mood. Okay, that's how I was feeling at that moment. And I'm not like that now. I'm now something else. But we tend to hang on to that. We tend to hang on to that story of ourselves. So what we need to do is take the step back and say, okay, I'm telling my story. Oh yeah, that's my old baggage. Oh yeah, that's what it is. I am the person who experiences that, but that is not me. It doesn't define me. We need to keep reminding ourselves of this because we do tell this story of who we are, and we do identify with it very, very closely, and we do relive especially old traumatic patterns, defensive mechanisms. And it's important for us to, if we want to change them, it's important, it's more than important, it's absolutely essential that we see it. We've got to see ourselves being reactive. We've got to see ourselves believing in this horrible story of who we actually are, what sort of person we are. And just see that, oh, that's a mood. It was a bad mood. Oh, I wish I hadn't. I'm embarrassed, but it was just a mood. It passed. It's not me. It's different. So we want to label these mental events as they happen. So feeling defensive. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling jealous. I'm feeling absolutely joyous and delighted and happy. Whatever it is, with radical honesty, we label it and move on. Just keep going. Okay, don't get stuck in your story. So, take a nice breath. And let go. You don't have to close your eyes. It's up to you. But keep them down. You don't want to be looking for distraction. Your attention is in the breath, in your body. And you're letting it slow down so you can see more clearly. And the breath becomes your anchor. Because after a moment you don't quite know where to place your attention anymore. I see my reactivity, I label it, now what? Back to the breath. Always back to the breath. The breath is your anchor. Ties you to the present moment. Reminds you of why you're here. To observe. To practice radical honesty. To see your reactivity, and by seeing it, to let go. And back to the breath. And you take 3 more breaths and open your eyes. So what have you learned? Mindfulness is paying attention to what's actually happening. That reactivity is simply letting your patterns unfold. No resistance, no attention, no alternative. And it seems as if there's no choice. And when you see mindfully how you're reacting or about to react, then you have an opportunity to let go, to drop your habits. And it's not just once. You can't just say, okay, I'm not going to be angry anymore. You can say, well, I'm working on my anger. I'm working on my respect for other people, my ability to tell my truth without disrespecting others. Okay? Something nice and precise. So I want to see when I'm not doing that, when I'm being rude, when I'm being disrespectful, why? What's going on here? Why do I need to say that? I'm giving into a reactive pattern. Oh, I see, I'm holding on to that old pattern. As soon as you see yourself holding on, you can let go. When you're caught up in the fog of reactivity and emotion, you don't know what to let go of. You're confused. You're emotionally confused. So mindfulness enables you to let go of reactivity by seeing it, identifying it for what it is. And remember what mindfulness itself is: conscious, present attention to unfolding experience without getting caught up in shoulds and shouldn'ts. And you will get caught up in your judgments and biases and expectations, but in time you'll learn to see them and you will name them. Again, you're going to label them: bias, expectation. Well, I sat down to meditate because I thought it was going to make me peaceful. Expectation. Oh, okay. Sometimes mindfulness is painful. Or, to put it another way, what you're mindful of is your pain. Because mindfulness doesn't get to pick and choose. Mindfulness deals with what is right here and now, in this instant. And if it's painful, your job is to call it painful. Simple as that. I love this picture. The wolf on the ice. Is it a wolf? I'm not sure. The dog on the ice, walking very cautiously. It's all melted on top. Who knows? That's mindfulness. You're moving through life cautiously with that constant warning. Who knows? You don't know what's going to happen next. You do know that everything is in a constant state of change. But you can never be sure that things are going to work out the way you expect. And so you stay alert, ready to adapt. That's the end of our first session. Next time we will be looking at the mechanism itself, the mechanism of especially letting go. What's involved? What obstacles can we expect? So on. So thanks for coming, and look forward to seeing you next time.